And what seeing it roll around on the syllabus made me think about was what I said just now about we're all sailors on the sea of information. And I'm reminded of that pig farmer, pig food kingpin from Chengdu. When I got to China, the richest man in the country ran the Peaceful Capital's pig food company. Andu. He was a multi-billionaire, and he produced the best T-shirt I ever saw in China. It was a white T-shirt with kind of very stylized Chinese characters on the back that said, "We're all in the same boat, row." I think this is my communist ideal. Anyway, so it just got me thinking, why do we care about these four words? What are they doing on this table of contents? How do they get to be among the most vital terms that you want to make sure a patient understands? You want to make sure a student understands. You really want to make sure your teachers understand. And we ourselves want to make sure that we are engaged in an ongoing refinement of our understanding of what such terms mean. So in this Ming Dynasty meditation manual, which was introduced to me by the particular monk who was kind of head of the teachers at the Taoist mountain outside of Chengdu, Qingchensang, the oldest home of organized Taoism, with trees and buildings on it that date back 1,800 years. So the dude who's in charge of the education at the topmost Taoist temple there, I asked him, I'd known this guy for years already. Finally one day I asked him, let's say I want to read a book about what you guys do here. Any suggestions? He hands me this book. This book is called Xingming Guizi. Xingming Guizi is a little difficult to translate concept. It basically names the text after carpenter's measures. But the implication is that these are tools that can be used for measuring, and by measuring we mean engineering, the most positive connotation, refining, working with, improving the efficiency of the vitality of life. That's a very non-literal and interpretive kind of rendering of the title. But it contains what was, at the time of its authorship, a kind of condensation of what was already many centuries of work at development of theory and methodology of practice, such as underlies what we think of as Taoist meditation, Taoist Qigong, Tai Chi, Taoist alchemy, many different systems which have kind of spun off of this kind of work over many, many centuries, been collected, been amended, It's an ongoing process. This is what this guy uses as his basic teaching text. Not a mystery text. It's widely known. It's a well-documented historical text, but of that kind of esoteric school. Not the kind of thing that you'd find in the New York Times. So obviously there's lots of interesting information in this book. On one page, and this is translated in A Brief History of Qi, I think. I think it's in that book. If it wasn't, it was supposed to be. But there's a passage which talks about these four terms: Taiji, Yin Yang, Qi, Tao. And the point it basically makes is that these are all four names of one thing. These four terms. Each term has its own specific meaning, its own emphasis, its own de-emphasis, its own slant on what is this thing. But it's as if you've got the four different perspectives available to understand, like the blind man and the elephant, what am I feeling here? So let's talk about each one of them, because each one of them has its own specific meaning, despite the fact that that meaning names just one phenomenon or one set of phenomena. So why do we call it Taiji? Taiji, the meaning is well known to us now. But really important, and particularly important in informing the mental operations involved in the practice of Taiji Chuan, to grasp that this is a cosmological concept. This is a concept which arises from that deep, deep human intellectual quest of where do I come from? Not only in some abstract way, but where do I come from? Like when we work in class on how does the movement get into the hands? Why do your hands move? That's the sense in which this question has particular, what was the adjective you used to describe the anxiety of harvest? Violent. the violent existential anxiety. Not just where do I come from, but why is there a universe here? Taiji is a term that comes cascading down from the centuries into that kind, from and into that kind of mindset. It speaks of the grandest limit, the most extreme boundary. This is Taiji. Well, you have to ask, if you've got a boundary, the universe always divides into three groups according to different systems' perspective. There's what's outside the system, there's what's inside the system, and there's the system. Taiji. What's on the other side of Taiji? This to me is a category of questions that I find the most interesting in both ancient and modern cosmology. If the universe is expanding, into what is it expanding? If you go to the edge of the universe, what's outside? Uh, Taiji brings the naming of the thing that it names into this context. This is the framing that the term Taiji evokes and brings to the discussion. One of the oldest Taiji poems, or Taiji classics, is attributed to this name, Wang Songye, from the Qing dynasty. It's the one that begins, Taiji comes from Wuji and is the mother of yin and yang. So there we find it well situated within its cosmological context. Wuji being the predecessor of Taiji. If you will, Wuji is the answer to my question of what's outside of Taiji. What's the background of Taiji? Taiji comes from Wuji, says the classic specifically and directly, means existence comes from non-existence. This is an idea which has been commonplace. This is not uniquely a Chinese notion. This is exactly the same notion as the ancient Greeks expressed in the notions of cosmos and chaos. Chaos means what in Greek? It means emptiness. The chaos is the chasm. It's the yawning, open emptiness from which the cosmos emerges. Cosmos is order. Taiji comes from Wuji. Cosmos comes from chaos. Reduce them down to English terms, and they mean exactly the same thing. So this is all contained in this drawer marked, what is the meaning of Taiji? What's popularly known in English as the yin-yang symbol is the Taiji diagram in Chinese. It's been a subject of study for hundreds and hundreds of years. In the Song Dynasty, the philosopher Zushi organized this enormous and quite typically Chinese intellectual project of gathering up all knowledge and compiling and revising and correcting and reissuing. This is something Chinese intellectuals have been doing for thousands of years. Under Zushi's guidance, the project had one specific category of just Taiji diagrams. All the Taiji diagrams from history and from far and wide were gathered up, or those that could be found. So, that took place almost 1,000 years ago. And the study has been ongoing ever since. largely because of the let's just say it's hard to find another concept which plays a more seminal role in all subjects which can be in any way appropriately called traditional Chinese. Traditional Chinese math, art, poetry, music, martial arts, you name it, Taiji is there. Taiji is there doing what it does. It generates the universe. What does the classic say? Taiji comes from Wuji and is the mother of yin and yang. From Taiji we get the yin and the yang. The boundary of existence is not a simple line which you cross over. It's this flow that takes place beneath and within all things. That's the assertion that drives a common misconception about Chinese thought, particularly as it compares to so-called Western thought, is that it is non-reductionistic. What I just stopped myself from saying was this feeling about the origin of things is what drives the compilation of what is probably the world's most reductionistic way of thinking that it's ever experienced. This reductionism says all things can be understood as manifestations of yin and yang. In the same kind of search for atomic structure that drove ancient Near Eastern thinkers, the Chinese have been trying for millennia to come to terms with where do things come from? How is the world put together? Yin-yang was their answer. And yin-yang are what? When you look at the characters, what do you see? You know this character? Someone have the character handy? The character is composed of a mountain, and next to the mountain in yin is shadow, and next to the mountain in yang is sun. So they are terms clearly interdependent terms that speak to a particular awareness. This is the awareness that's driven by the sensibilities of farmers. It is the awareness about the presence, or indeed the absence, of light. It is something that emerges from the practice of the most basic human science, observation of the natural world. And what it tells us as an historical fact is that the Chinese, for countless generations, ever since they stepped onto the path of agricultural development, have been unsurpassed note takers. They make observations and they take careful notes. There's ancient Chinese astronomical notations of phenomena that modern astronomers know to have taken place precisely at the times recorded in these Chinese notes. The Chinese were good observers and accurate note takers. They have been for a very long time. And such careful scholarship has been directed at this question of origins and the ongoing dynamism of the origins of the universe in our day-to-day experience. Yin Yang. The great treatise of the I Ching contains a passage that begins, one yin, one yang, thus Tao. There you have it. What is Tao in that construct? It implies in that usage the totality of phenomena, the 10,000 things. In Chinese numerological expression, the concept of 10,000 means endless. 100 means many. 1,000 means really a lot. But 10,000 means totality. The Tao, the way things are, is understood to be, as the Confucian classic, Zongyong, the upright pivot, the unwobbling pivot, the doctrine of the mean states. If it departs from the Tao, it's not, it doesn't exist. The Tao implies the totality of phenomena of nature. The Tao follows nature. Taiji, Yin Yang, Tao. We haven't talked about Qi yet. In some ways, one of the most interesting things about this passage of Ximing Grade-Zi that I've been referring to is the inclusion of the concept of Qi. Until you really dig in beneath the surface a bit of what does the word Qi really mean to convey. And Qi is the power that generates from yin and yang. I like to say that if yin and yang are understood as the cosmic dancers, Qi is the dance. Qi is the manifestation. It's what only exists between things. it comes into existence whenever there is the potential for betweenness, and its existence is the actual manifest force, power, energy, whatever you want to call it, that expresses itself whenever there is this yin-yang potential. You know, it's a world view. It's a way of viewing the environment. And it's a way that sees the interconnectedness of all phenomena. It's a way that understands that if there appears to be some separation between things, what you view as the separator is actually the connector. The walls that we build to insulate and separate ourselves from others are often what connects us to them the most. If you do a simple little exercise of sitting or standing quietly and extend your awareness, as we were talking earlier, to the edge of the universe, you will discover that nothing gets in your way. There's no object, there's no emptiness, there's no space, there's no expanse that serves to disconnect you from any of it. We are in outer space. In fact, you can plot our position in our own galaxy. We're way off to the edge. We are really in outer space. This sense we have, that allows us to be led around by our noses as political objects, this sense of normality and desks and lamps and automobiles and stuff, it's very peculiar in the cosmic perspective. And our devotion to it, even more so. It's what flies under the banner of reality. So, you get a little sense or flavor of what these words mean? If we speak of Taiji, we speak of the schematic of existence. If we speak of yin and yang, we speak to the components. If we speak of qi, we speak of the function, of the operation of this little system. And if we speak of Tao, we speak of its wholeness, its totality. Now all we need to know is, what is it? Questions?
I'm just thinking about the Tao. Trying to understand it.
You know, Tao is a character that presents us with, one of these kind of thought-provoking Chinese pictograms. It's made up of a foot in motion, on which a head sits. So it speaks to the self-motivated, self-aware capacity for awareness moving through the world. Everything else is interpretation. In widespread usage, both in ancient literature and modern, one of the primary meanings of this word is path. Sometimes in modern Chinese cities it names a big street, a wide street, but often it's used as the name of like a footpath. The metaphoric implication of those literal components that I just named wind up with a word that means that its root's something like a way to go. Taken in its more broad philosophical context, it's the way things are. Which gets shortened to simply the way. The way things are being, as this passage from Lao Tzu suggests, merely the natural way. The way that does not require intervention or action. Does that help?
Throw a rock in the water. I was listening to an audio translation of the Tao on the web. So how does that reconcile with the Tao that can be named as not the Tao?
You were listening to what?
Audio translation of Tao Te Ching on the way out from one of the chapters, one of the early chapters. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So just a little fun with the idea of naming and the concept of Tao. process.
We talked about that a little bit
Last week.
last week. What that kind of sentence helps us to understand is a very fundamental value in this system of knowledge creation and transmission, in the epistemic customs of people. And what is that value? That value is non-action, wu wei. An ideal of the Taoists that's found really throughout Lao Tzu is non-action. The sage, he writes, follows the way, the wordless teaching, and manages his affairs with non-action.
The same translation I was listening to was putting forth for Wu Wei the additional idea of coercion, the act of coercion. So they were supplementing the traditional non-action with a non-coercive stance. I didn't know how you.
Yeah, it's I don't know who's.
It's aims and all.
Yeah, it's common to see that kind of extension of metaphor.
A little too specific, maybe.
Yeah, as often is the case, it speaks to the sensibility of the translators end rather than the texts end. It's a target-oriented kind of interpretation. I find it more useful coming from the target end to release the demand that somehow it be made more sensible from the perspective of the target. I much prefer to understand the constraints that worked on the authors of the text. They're, after all, the ones who selected the words to say. And anyway, at its worst, it's led to, what is kind of blatant moralizing in interpretation, flying under the guise of translation.
Well, there's the rub with the Confucian chapters 18 and 19, 36 and 37 in the Tao. With once you say what the moral law is, then good luck holding that course.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of the observance of the way of nature, maybe.
The original Taoists, the 5 bushels of rice cult, were seen in their day and for centuries afterwards as essentially back to nature hippies, out in the woods, practicing free love, living a kind of communal lifestyle, being weird and displaced.
Mount Sean Taoist, then.
Yeah.
Might have been adjusting.
Exactly. What time is it? You can't get out of the role of timekeeper.
It's 10 minutes to 1.
Let's take 10.